Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Melissa Nielsen with Waldorf Essentials, and today I am super excited because we have a very special guest. In Waldorf, we do a lot of talking about what do you do when your child is on the spectrum, but there's not a whole lot written about what do you do when you have a child with Downs or other struggles beyond that. And so I have an awesome guest today. She's a woman that I have known for 13 years. And for those of you who have been following us for a long time, she was, so we used to be like years ago, like 10 years ago, maybe not 10, quite 10, but almost 10. We were a little garden flower. And that's what we were before we were Waldorf Essentials. And she painted the very first logo that we had. And so she's this amazing painter. So I don't know, for those of you who might remember, she was the painting that was the part of that logo. It was these cute fairies in a flower garden. And so she was our first artist that did that. So she has 4 children. The oldest is neurotypical, amazing child, and she's just a little bit older than Super Sam. And so she kind of was, her baby had just been born. I was pregnant with Sam, so we have kept in touch through the years, and really been able to talk a lot about our kids, and she was a client that kind of became a friend after that. And so with that, then she had a set of twins that had some other struggles, and she's going to talk about that a little bit, and then she'll also talk about her youngest that was born with Downs. So I think it's an important conversation to have. I don't think that there's enough conversations about that. I think that often when people come to Waldorf, they get overwhelmed by it, and then when they're overwhelmed by it, then it's easy to go, this is too hard, I'm going to do something else. And in fact, I've worked with many moms that have said, you know what, I love this, but I can't do this, I'm gonna go do something else. Or I don't understand how I can bring it in to to where my child is. It's too hard. And so but what's amazing to me is that she was just sort of laughing that she is definitely, I think, the Waldorf poster child, because she has like the whole run of everything. She has so many challenges that she has, or struggles that she turned into challenges, and that she went ahead and just moved forward and found ways that it worked for her children. And that's really what this is all about. It's about finding ways that Waldorf works for your child. And so I'm going to grab her here. Let's see. Her name is Linda. She's super amazing. If you are on Instagram, you are not going to see her, but you will hear her. And we're going to have the video, hopefully, pray that the tech works, excuse me, live on Facebook. If you have questions, you're welcome to hop on and ask. We'll have the video live on Facebook, and then you are welcome to ask questions there, and we'll just go from there. So let's see. I just sort of gave you a little bit of an intro, but why don't you talk about sort of your kids and your background, and let's get started.
Okay. Well, hello, all Facebook people. Let's see. Kids. I have 4 kids. My oldest will be 14 the end of next month. And then I have 11-year-old twins, boy and a girl. And my youngest, Lewis, is 9, and he has Down syndrome. So that's sort of...
And the twins have something else going on. What else? What was their official diagnosis when they were born?
All right. Well, with the twins, I have one typical, Jackson. He's just a regular guy. And then Georgie was born with what's called Vater syndrome or Vacteral syndrome. And that's an acronym that means a whole lot of stuff was going on when she was born. Right. So I've called her medically intense in the past because she had a whole lot of medical issues when she was younger, 5 surgeries by the time she was 7. And she also has physical differences.
Right.
So she doesn't have 2 usable hands, which is the biggest hurdle that we've had to jump.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I recently found out that Georgie has some learning difficulties.
Something else going on, right?
So there's lots going on with her.
So do you want to start with Lewis, or do you want to start with Georgie? Maybe let's start with Lewis, because I think that's I think that because you sort of said that everything you did with Georgie to alter the curriculum would help you with Lewis, but I think that I also think that the diagnosis of Downs, or the worry about Downs with regards to the curriculum, I think is a pretty strong one for a lot of moms that really want to do Waldorf. So let's start there. Let's talk about that. Sort of like where you started your research and you know, and the like. So go ahead.
Right. Well, I started years ago researching curative education, and I had the privilege of meeting Robin Brown, and she has a curative school in California, and she's probably the only one in this country right now that's doing curative.
She wrote a book too. What's the book called? I have it on my shelf.
A Practical Guide to Curative Education.
Right. And that kind of goes with the curative education lectures / book by Steiner. Because you started with that, it seems like.
I did. I started with Steiner, and reading Steiner, as anyone knows who's tried to read him, is like reading Greek. Yes. He's very difficult. It's old language, you know, plus he's very esoteric, so you really
it's very heady material.
It is. It's very heady material, and the curative stuff is so hard to read, especially with a child with Down syndrome, because when you read the curative work and then you sort of jump off from there and start reading the Carl Koning work, and he's the one that founded the Camp Hill movement. Mm-hmm. The way they speak about Down syndrome is like a very old way. And they use the words like the R word, which is very offensive these days.
Right.
And, you know, they use the word mongoloid, which isn't used anymore.
Right.
And it's so hard to read that language.
Right.
Because this is your baby.
Right. Absolutely.
And you know, and it's like, I don't know, like the medical stuff is easier to deal with than the cognitive stuff.
Right.
For myself. Mm-hmm. Like the medical stuff is sort of like, you know, okay, this is broken, we can fix it. This needs to be moved around, we can have a surgery. You know, granted, it's hard, you know, but it's not the same type of mystery that's going on when you have cognitive issues.
Absolutely.
And, you know, you're shooting in the dark.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, totally understand that. Because I think that piece is present no matter what you've got going on, no matter if it's autism spectrum stuff, Down stuff, like what, it doesn't matter. It is that shot in the dark stuff is the stuff that is so hard about being the parent to these kids.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So as far as like research went, you know, I started reading Steiner, and then I read everything. I mean, you know, Ursula Grahl is a gal from the 70s that had a curative school who was a student of Steiner's, Carl Koning. I have connections with a Camp Hill school up in upstate New York, and I've talked to a few teachers up there. And then I also have Barbara Brissett Mills in my life, who is a eurythmist.
Mm-hmm. I know who she is. Yeah.
And she's
a curative eurythmist, isn't she?
She is a curative eurythmist, and she's also a really great friend. Mm. So I have lots of resources available to me to sort out
right
the curative aspect of Waldorf education.
What would you say to the mom that does not have those friends in awesome places?
Well, I didn't have those friends in awesome places.
You kind of made them, right? You hunted them down.
I hunted people down.
You were like squeaky wheel.
Oh, yeah. You know, like call,
right.
call, email. Hello, remember me?
I remember some of those conversations that we've had, for sure. You have to be the advocate for what you want for your child. And so you have to decide, hey, right. I'm going to be this person's friend. They're going to know who I am. And, you know, I think right. because it is not something that they see every day, I think that a lot of these people are probably pretty happy to help you.
They are happy to help me. But here's the thing that I found interesting. As much as like Waldorf can seem sort of outer worldly when you begin,
right?
Curative is from another solar system. I mean, really, and there's not a lot of information, and the information that is out there is sort of like shrouded in weird language, and you know, it was an interesting road at the beginning.
I bet so.
But here's what I did. With having said all of that and how difficult it was to become a student of curative education, what ended up happening is I sort of took a couple of nuggets, the things that hit me repeatedly as I went through the material and talked to people and read more books. There were a couple of ideas that stuck with me over and over again. And I think that it applies whether you have a child with special needs or not. And those nuggets are that you're always talking to the perfect child on the inside.
Oh, amen. Yes.
That has been my lifeboat.
Yeah.
Through the whole thing. When I get frustrated, when I'm ready to sort of toss the whole thing out the window, I remind myself that there's this perfect child on the inside.
Yeah.
That whether I'm getting the feedback loop that they understand me or have any clue of what I'm talking about, I know that somewhere on the inside it's landing.
Right.
So that's been my lifeboat through the whole process.
And I think that that's a pretty big one, because I think it doesn't matter what special needs are going on. I think that if you can remember that, especially on your worst days, especially on your days when they're tantruming because they can't figure out what's going on in their body, or you're just wanting to have a tantrum because you just want, you are getting over the dream that this is going to be a neurotypical child and it's not. Like no matter where you are, that if you can just remember that piece, that on the inside, all is right.
Right.
And there is this veil that separates what's going on here in this physical plane from what is going on spiritually.
And a lot of curative education, that's the foundation for most of the writing. And it gets pretty esoteric because you have your physical body, which is your shell.
Right.
And then you have your etheric body, which is your light body that enters into your physical body. So it's sort of like, it's that, you know, etheric astral body that you're always talking to, even if the physical stuff is a mess on the outside.
Right. I agree.
So, you know, and then if you have in your area the opportunity to do eurythmy is always speaking to
spiritual,
the inner body, because you can do eurythmy if you were paralyzed in the bed.
Right.
So that's why I'm like, I am a eurythmy convertee.
No, I think so. I think that my own experiences with eurythmy, and I've been at this for a long time, and so I was like, oh well, I kind of know what to expect. But when we had a eurythmist that came to San Diego about three years ago, and I thought, oh my gosh, I choked at how much money I was going to spend for this little like 3-4 week program. But Soraya went because she was pretty nonverbal until she was about 3, and we had been through speech therapy, and some things had helped, but some things hadn't, and her tantrum was kind of out of control, and so here comes this eurythmist, and I thought, I'm going to try this, and it just about broke the bank, but I don't regret a penny of it. So my son was gone on his mission during that time, and so he didn't see us every week or talk to us every week, and we got to talk to him on Mother's Day. And she had been going through this like 8-week program, 6-8 week program. I can't remember how long it was. And he wept at how, he said, I cannot believe how well she's talking. And that was not even curative eurythmy. It was just eurythmy. And so the things that they had done, and I would ask her, so what did you do today? Because, you're not allowed to stay there. She'd say, oh, I just colored. And I'd be like, what? Okay. Spending this crazy amount of money for you to sit and color, which I know that's not all they did. But in my head, I was even doing the doubting thing, and I knew the benefit of eurythmy, but I still was like, because you don't see it right away. It's like the vitamins that you take and they help you over the long run. But my goodness, the amount of change from when she started versus when she was done was phenomenal. So I absolutely agree. If you can get to eurythmy, you should get there. It's amazing.
Right. I agree.
So how have you had all 4 of them doing eurythmy at different points, or?
Yeah. Since the beginning.
Since the beginning. Very good.
Yeah. Like I was pregnant with Lewis when I met Barbara. Mm-hmm. And we have been going ever since.
And Barbara is there in Texas where you are, or I don't know why I was thinking she was in Denver.
But. Yep, she's here in Texas.
Got it.
And, like I said, over the years we did, there was a homeschool group that we did for a while, and then I took over the homeschool group, and we did that for years, and then my plate sort of ran over with therapy and all that good stuff. And Barbara was like, hey, let's just do it with your kids. And we've been 3-4 years now where we go to her house once a week, and she has a studio. Mm-hmm. And it's been amazing because it's just us. Mm-hmm. She's really been able to sort of dive more into the curative eurythmy than before. It was sort of group, so it's more like kindergarten eurythmy. Right. Yeah.
Archetypal form and that kind of thing.
Right.
So what would you say to the mom that does not have that available to her? Would you say learn all you can and bring it as much as you can to your child? I mean, it's such a hard one. Eurythmy is probably the least amount of information out there. And we have some moms that we work with that, in fact, we're going to film at the first part of March. We're going to film a mom who's been studying eurythmy, and she brings it to her group, and she's working on a course. And so,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and she's worked with Reg, and she's worked with some other eurythmists that have sort of given her this green light. Yes, you should do this, because even though you're not certified trained eurythmist, we need to bring something to people, something.
Right. So, and I think that's the nugget. It's something. And something that Barbara told me early on when I started. I mean, I literally went to her in tears because I'm like planning circle time. My kids are little. Mm-hmm. I'm doing circle time, and I have no musical background. And I'm like, I don't know it's just songs, and I don't know how to sing, and I don't know what to do. And she looked at me and she was like, Linda, make it up.
Right? Exactly.
And it was like
that's what I tell moms, just make it up.
Because it was like I was given permission.
Right? To do it wrong.
To do it wrong and to make up the songs on
Right.
my own. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
So every little verse I found, I made up movement, I made up the tune. And to this day, my kids, like I still do Circle with Lewis. And like Georgie and Jackson still love Circle Time. So because they remember all those verses.
They do. When my adult son was here a couple of months ago, we have our rhythm chart on the wall. He goes, Mom, it says you're supposed to do Circle Time right now. Why are you not doing Circle Time? I said, oh, we were just going to take some time off since you were here. He's like, no, we need to do Circle Time. I'm like, dude, you're almost 20. It was funny. Yeah, they remember all of that and they love it.
They do. And so, yeah, I say, hey, I make it up. Yeah. I give you permission.
Yeah, that's what I tell moms all the time. Make it up. Because making it up, doing the work, making it up, like making an attempt is like, because intention is everything. Like where you're going with that it's to amazing places. So you have to be willing to look silly and to make it up and to step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. What would you say, like Lewis specifically, did you have to alter? I mean, he's 9. So what have you had to alter so far for the curriculum? And what do you foresee maybe needing to alter in the future? And then also talk about, because I get a lot of questions from moms that have kids that are not, and they're probably somewhere between where Lewis is and autism. So they might have a bunch of different letters and stuff after what they've got going on. But I often get questions like, how do I bring this curriculum content when they just seem like that they're so far behind? I don't want to bring 3rd grade material when they're really only 1st grade level. And I always tell them, no, bring it up to where they should be. So talk about that for a minute.
All right. So I did this with the twins. And I'm continuing this with Lewis. So I divide our schooling into 2 components. One component is the Waldorf curriculum, and the other component is skill sets. So the Waldorf component would be the stories and the way that Steiner laid it out.
Right.
So you would do fairy tales in 1st grade and fables and animal stories in the 2nd grade. And in the 3rd grade, it's Native Americans, and so on and so on.
Old Testament stuff. Yeah.
So that's the part of Waldorf that I follow. And then as far as the skill sets go, as skills, we're all over the board with skill sets. So for Georgia and Jackson, it's taken 2 years of doing a skill for every 1 year regular curriculum.
Okay.
So it took 2 years for letter and number recognition. It's taken 2 years to get to like a 3rd grade reading level. But they're doing 5th grade Waldorf curriculum.
Right. So you're adjusting, you're sticking with the story content where it should be, which is what I always tell families. And you're adjusting the academic work to where they are, the skills where they need to be. Exactly. That's exactly what I teach parents.
So, and then anywhere that I can sort of fold the skills into the curriculum, I also do that. So to give you an example, and here's where I'm sort of moving into Lewis, because I started Lewis late. I started him in 1st grade curriculum last year because he just wasn't ready on any level to sit down and pay attention and do desk work. So we just did circle for another year, like kindergarten stuff. So this year is really the first year, and I start school in January. So my year goes January to November.
Okay.
Instead of the regular school year. So starting just recently in January, I took the idea of, I got really stressed. I was really stressed out that he wasn't going to get the stories in progression. I don't know why I was hung up on that. I was like, he's not getting the fables. We didn't read,
Right.
We didn't read XYZ. I was so freaked out that I was like, no, we're going to do second grade this year. But what ended up happening is at one point, it was sort of like a little light beam shown. And I saw him for the almost 10-year-old boy that he was.
And you're giving me the chills. Yep.
And he doesn't want to do baby stuff anymore. Right. He wants to do big boy stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like...
Because it's teaching to that inner space. That's perfect.
Right. That's like seeing that perfect inner child shining through.
Yep.
And I really had to sort of check myself like, wow, you need to let go of what you want.
Right. But that's such an important piece, because so often she's the stumbling block. Mom is we're the block. We're the one that can't get over and look at the child.
Right.
Look at the child and listen to what the child needs. Get on your knees, get into meditation, and get clear on what the child needs instead of what you think they should have right now.
Right.
Such a different space.
Oh, yep. So we're starting Native American studies. So here's where it really plays in. Louis is just learning his numbers. So I got a whole plan for him. I made up this big land of Numeria exploration when Georgie and Jackson did numbers. So everybody's excited about going to the land of Numeria with Louis. But we're just starting really slow and just sort of starting with beans. And he's also starting to read a little. So it's the concept of, this is the number one. This is one bean. And these letters put together, which he knows O-N-E, that's a word. That means one, right? So that's that whole thing. And then starting in with the Native American studies, the first project is a wampum belt.
Oh, so he's got some weaving to do.
Right. So it's beads, right? And you have to count. So... And you have to count 1,000 times in order to make the full belt.
Right.
So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over and over and over again, which is what you have to do with a child with Down syndrome. It's repeat.
Right.
So
are you saying too that he picked up reading though, a little more organically?
What the reading part is going to be a big sort of question mark for us, because Louis is not quite speaking yet. Okay, got it. He has language. He has sign language. He has an iPad, and he uses a speech augmentation program. He's doing really well with. And he does have some spoken language, but he's not fully speaking.
Got it.
So
that makes total sense. Right.
Right. So I can't say, read these words to me.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So I have to sort of take it on faith a little bit that he's grasping the concept that we have all these letters, and when you put these letters together in a certain order, they make words.
They make words, right. Got it.
So that's sort of where I am with him.
But I love that it's not keeping you from moving forward with the actual story content and creating a plan and all of those things, because you are just taking where he is in his skill set and bringing that into the story content.
Right. And it's just it's very sort of, if you can put in your mind, like you have all these lovely stories, and especially with the Native American story block, which I love, that you have all these lovely stories, but it's not going to be the beautiful main lesson book, and it's not going to be the gorgeous dioramas.
Right. And that's what people get so hung up on. They get so hung up on that, and you really just have to be where your child is. Because, even so Sam is 12 and a half, and he can draw and he can paint, but he's colorblind. And so I can't expect the spontaneous drawing from him that's going to look like it would from a child that's not colorblind. And so it's very much the same, like accepting where you are and just enjoying that space for what it is.
And it's super, super simple at this point. But what's interesting is, even though the skill sets are simple,
mm-hmm.
he's super excited about the story content,
mm-hmm.
right? And the projects that are sort of coming along once you sort of hit third grade.
Mm-hmm.
The projects get a little bit more sophisticated.
They do, right?
So the Wampum Belt, that's a pretty sophisticated project, and I did help him a little, but he made the whole thing himself, and he has been literally walking around with the Wampum Belt for a week, showing everybody
awesome.
Because he's so proud of himself.
Right.
And
that's the piece you're looking for. You're looking for that pride in their work.
Right. And and because we had to count 4 beads 1,000 times, I can say now how many beads.
Right.
And he said 4. So I think that's awesome.
Right.
And I can ask him to show me how many is 4. And he can hold up 4 fingers. So
nice.
I know that he has the concept of 4.
Right.
What is 4?
I think that's so important, Linda, because I think that I think it can get very overwhelming. And we were talking a little bit before we got on live about the whole, like, the people that say, oh, well, this will never happen or that will never happen. And that's such a damning place to be, and such a frustrating place to be as a mother, because you want to go, you just watch. You just watch, because even if it doesn't happen, I am going to exhaust myself trying, because that's what this child needs.
And I always tell myself, like, this is why we homeschool.
Yep.
So I don't have to listen to the limitations.
Right.
There's no limitations here.
Right. Everything is possible.
Yeah, everything is possible, and we just got to try.
Agreed.
And as far as, like, other moms out there sort of struggling, I think this is also, like, a big, 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 huge component of it. And Steiner even addresses it in his curative writing. And that's that you have to have instinct. You have to trust your gut. You have to.
You do. I agree.
Because you're not always like my oldest daughter, we were talking about this. She is like the poster child for Waldorf.
Right. I love it.
She's gifted.
Right.
She's autistic. Her main lesson books are gorgeous. Everything I threw at her stuck. It was easy peasy, like out of the box, right?
I love what you said. You said that that God sort of was like making fun of you. Because here I'm like, wow, this is so easy, right?
And I love it, and it's so exciting, and Waldorf education is so arts based, and I'm an artist,
right?
She's an artist, and we're making these gorgeous things, and then I got the twins come along, and I have Georgia with physical challenges, and also finding out later that we have learning challenges. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck happened? And I've got like 5 years of written curriculum and all these projects, and I'm like, I can't do any of this stuff now. I was so dejected,
I remember we had some conversations many years ago. I remember I remember exactly where I was standing in the house that I was standing, and we were talking about some of her physical limitations, and you were just like, I don't know how she's going to grip a pencil. She's never going to knit. And I remember you being like really struggling with those pieces and just sort of like getting to a place where you can accept what she can do. And I think it's such a good friend of mine said to me many years ago, and it applies to so many things. She said, losing the dream is harder than losing the reality. Once we sort of let go of this dream child that we thought we were inventing in our head, and we go, this is the child that's actually in front of us, then we can actually walk forward with the child that's in front of us and create new dreams for that child, and create not realistic, because they don't actually like that term realistic. I really believe that so many things are possible that we just don't allow ourselves to think about as human beings, that we get so mired in the negative that we forget that just about anything is possible, and we just have to be willing. And so when we sort of let go of the dream that we had for that child, then we can start to like come up with the space of what can happen. And it's like it busts through those limitations of that dream even. But we just have to be willing. We have to be willing. We have to be willing to be in that space of being open. And I like what you said about like the intuition piece, because I see so many moms are like, well, I'm just going to hunt on the internet for the answer. And before you get on the internet to ask for the answer, you've got to sort of ask God, the universe, whatever you call that noun. You have to like get to that space, get to your higher self space. You're the one who brought this child forth. So you have to get to that higher self space and go, okay, what does my spirit self hear from this child's spirit self? Like what is it that I need to bring this child? And it's so much deeper than what you're going to find on the internet. So much deeper.
Yeah. And to be honest, like sitting in that space where you're going to trust your own instinct.
It's terrifying.
And you're going to, meditate.
Right.
And trust what's being given to you by higher power. To step out into that space as mom is absolutely terrifying.
It is terrifying.
And everybody thinks you're a loon.
Everybody does. Agreed.
Yeah.
Until you start, I think what turned around for me, like with my oldest, with the autism stuff, what turned around for me was when people were able to see, oh, wait a minute, what she's doing might not be what everybody says she should do, but what she's doing works. And it was making the differences that he needed, because no matter what articles are written, I mean, those are great resources, like articles and books, those are great resources, but they're not speaking to your child specifically. So you have to first dial into what does your child specifically need. Then you can look at these other resources, and you can take those resources for what they are. You can look at them as, a help, but they don't need to be your primary. Your primary should be your relationship that you have with this child on a much deeper level. And when you can dial into that, it's a game changer. It's a game changer.
Right. And, I think it's also important for other moms out there homeschooling in this tradition, that it's okay to sort of not follow the program verbatim, because your life is going to be filled with therapy and doctor's appointments and emergencies and
right. Agreed.
Yeah,
and it doesn't mean you should throw the baby out with the bathwater, because while it is kind of a way of thinking, it's not necessarily a way of doing always. It's definitely a way of
thinking. It's sort of like, what I said about sort of holding on to the curriculum so tightly that I was like, we're going to do fable stories. And I had to let it go because now that's a whole year missed that Louis didn't get. But I don't know. He's the fourth child. I'm sure he got it on some level.
He probably did. Plus, what's amazing about some of those stories is that you can still tell those stories. I mean, I think what's interesting to me is we did a bunch of, last year, we did a bunch of Thornton Burgess. Like, I think we read, I don't want to say we read them all because there's like probably 100 Thornton Burgess books, but we read a lot. And I saw how Sam, who was 11 at the time, ate it all up, just like Soraya did, who was 7. You know, so I think what's amazing about the story content is just because you're out of that grade and you're not doing lessons on those stories doesn't mean you can't have fun with those stories.
Right.
For sure.
So you have to, it's sort of like you have to, in your mind, compartmentalize things.
Right.
So you're like, well, these are the stories that we're working with.
Right.
You know, these are the stories for fun.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know,
exactly.
If I want to go back, and I mean, like my older kids still love fairy tales.
Oh, of course.
Like, Georgie still asks me for fairy tales all the time.
What's funny about fairy tales is because Sam has a thing for fairy tales too, is it opens the door to other things. Like anytime he sees anything that's based on a fairy tale, he's like, I want to know that. I want to understand what this writer or this filmmaker was thinking when they wrote this story based on, you know, whatever the fairy tale was. So it opens them up to enjoying things on a much different level. Agreed.
So I think it's, you know, I think you have to just sort of relax into the space.
I agree.
And
don't beat yourself up.
You know, don't beat yourself up. Stick with the age-appropriate story content, and then work the skill levels at whatever level they're at.
Will you talk for a moment about, because you have Mona, who you said was, you know, like the Waldorf poster child. How did you work to, I don't want to use the word suffer because I think that sort of paints this like sad picture, but did she have challenges and struggles because her younger siblings were going through these other issues? And how did you balance, like, here you have all this work you can do with her, versus then not being able to do it with your younger ones? How did it affect her, and how did you as a mom, and how are you continuing as a mom being able to sort of bridge that gap? Unless you haven't felt it. Maybe you haven't felt it.
In our family, there's always the conversation like, this is our family. Mm-hmm. You know, so there may be the time that, you know, I have to take somebody to the hospital. And all I can say is, I'm sorry, and we're going to pick up where we left off.
It is tomorrow. What it is, right.
Because this is what our family is. The other thing is I've struggled over the years with rhythm. Because our life, there's always like bombs that are lobbed into the middle of my rhythm. You know, you get a nice rhythm going, and then you spend a week in the hospital, and there goes your rhythm out the window, and it takes you 3 weeks to recover, and it's just crazy. So I have held on to morning time and bedtime.
That's great. That's really good advice.
Whatever happens during the day is going to happen. And if we get a string of weeks where life is quiet, that's awesome. But morning time is solid, and bedtime is solid. And
it's a really important time. So yes, agreed.
Whatever happens between those two bookends, so be it.
Well, and I think too, the older I get, and you and I are kind of on the same like trajectory here, I see stuff coming and I go, okay, I know I'm going to have to make some adjustments. It's not going to be perfect for the next little bit, but as long as I can keep these anchors of morning and evening, then I know that whatever happens in the middle will be fine. And so you get to a place where it doesn't have to be what it says on the chart. The chart is your guide. That's a great guide. But if it's all crazy and not what's going on the chart, as long as you have those anchor points and those anchor points are solid and you are solid, because I think that's like the biggest piece. You drive the rhythm. Your kids, you're like the Pied Piper. Your kids will follow you anywhere as long as you're solid. If you are like constantly struggling and upset, then you're going to, struggle, because your kids are going to be like, oh, this lady, I can't trust her for anything. She's just falling apart all the time. So you want to be in a place where you start to feel the rhythm, and then you have it. It's not some external, it's an internal.
Right.
You know?
And I think that over the years, especially with the bedtime routine and keeping it solid, it I don't know, it sort of lets them breathe out.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Where like, even if the day was crazy, or if we had surgery, or if whatever it is.
Right.
It lets them know, like, everything's okay. You get tucked into bed, everyone's safe.
Right.
And I think that sort of sets their mind at ease.
I think it does too. It is definitely a breathing out. It is something they can count on. They know it's going to happen, and they know that that's a good connection time with you. So even if there's craziness that's going on during the day, they know that they can connect with you on that level at that time. Right. I have a mom here with I don't know if it's a question. Karen says, my son has an ultra rare genetic disease. Karen, do you want to tell us what that is? And maybe you're welcome to type in the chat here, like what struggles you're having, and let's see if Linda has any thoughts for you. So I'm going to give her a second to do that. I was trying to think questions for you. So it sounds like Mona is like, she's like, this is just how it is, which is great. That this is our family. And I think that we sort of live in this weird time culturally where we think that everybody has to have a problem with something, and oh no, we're doing a child a disservice, but I think that we forget that the family unit is such an important, strong bond. And when the family has each other's back, you're going to move mountains together. And even if those mountains are the kids that are in your home and the struggles that you're having in your home.
Right. And to give everybody sort of context, when Mona started curriculum at 7, Georgie was still really medically intense. So that was a time of midnight emergency room runs on a regular basis. And surgeries and 3-4 doctor's appointments a week. But through that, Mona still got all the first grade content. And I mean, I started her. Mm-hmm. So,
and you were still able to do sort of all these things that you were saying. You were able to bring her all these artistic things, all these, because you were determined to do so. You were determined to at least. And I think that that's...
And I mean, I'm sure it didn't look pretty. I'm sure it was like, a couple hours here, a couple hours there.
But
maybe working in a Saturday and a Sunday. But she got all the content, and I made it cohesive. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't think she knew... At that point, how does she know that that's not...
everybody's reality.
Normal.
Right.
Mom's got a dash because,
right.
Georgie stopped breathing, that's normal everyday life for everybody else, right?
Right. No, and I think that that's really important because, like I said, I do think that culturally we sort of, everybody's got an issue with something these days. And I go, well, it's just how it is. It's just how family is. You deal with, you deal with with things that come up, and you deal with them together. And I think when you don't work to create this unity, then things like start to fall apart. But when you have this sort of family unity, I think that it's magical. I've got a couple of questions over here on Facebook. So I'm going to read them to you. The first one.
Okay.
So Karen says, his missing part of his genetic makeup, what he has is POMC. He loves rhythm and routine, but he is a little delayed with many of the fourth grade things. I think we will just repeat fourth next year. So what, I don't know, Karen, if you've been listening the whole time, but what Linda and I are just talking about is you need to give him the story content for the year that he is, for his age. You can always adjust the skill set to meet him where he is skill wise, but giving him the story content where he should be for his age is really very important, because you're speaking to not just his physical body, you're speaking to his spiritual body. And would you have anything to say about that, Linda?
No, I concur.
It's something that's really hard for us to wrap our mainstream brains around, because,
right,
you know, but Waldorf is so different. It's so different.
Right.
And then go ahead.
And I think that, you know, I think at some point it's worthwhile for anyone who's going to follow the Waldorf tradition to read a little Steiner.
Right.
And once you read even a little bit of Steiner, this harping on like stick with the story content for the age makes so much sense.
It does.
Because you're meeting the child where they are developmentally, even if they have cognitive issues. Right. Like I said, you're always talking to the perfect child on the inside.
Right.
So even if your child is delayed, they're still, you know, like Lewis, he's like super delayed. I mean, we're doing kindergarten, first grade skill stuff, but he's like this 9-year-old little boy that doesn't want to do baby stories. Stuff. He wants to do Native American stories. And those stories are meeting him where he is on a spiritual level,
right,
as opposed to where he is on a physical level.
So Karen, I hope you got that, because she said back, but his mental capacity isn't on par. It doesn't matter. What's going on in his physical body is not what's going on in his spiritual body. And so understanding that his spirit needs what it needs from the story content. So now she says, yes, I see. So like understanding that the story content is what his spirit needs. The skill set, that the writing, the reading, whatever all of those pieces are, the other externals, that you should do where he is, where his physical body is. So, you know, like sort of being where he needs to be physically versus where he needs to be spiritually is different. She said, I like what she said about talking to the perfect child within. So if you didn't catch the beginning of our interview, I would love for you to go back and watch it, because I think there will be some nuggets there for you, Karen. Okay, there's also another comment here. Do you have any suggestions with regards to outside time when you have children with different physical abilities? I struggle with getting outside enough because of this. Also, because we have to leave our property to play outside. They live in a condo. And there's a polar vortex. Well, Linda lives in Texas. She shouldn't have the polar vortex problem. But I will say that when we lived in Idaho, the thing that cracks me up about the polar vortex, which I know y'all are cold. I get that. I totally get that. But that was when we lived in Rexburg, Idaho. If you look at it on the map, if you ever look at a weather map, there's this little corner of Idaho on the southwest or southeast corner that's right below Yellowstone National Park that is always cold. When we lived there, January, the entire month of January was below freezing and often below zero. And so we sort of had like polar vortex was what it always was. And so we were still outside. We still went outside as often as possible, as long as we weren't going to have our lungs freeze when we walked outside. But, you know, it definitely still try, because I think often the biggest barrier for getting outside was just me. But what would you say, Linda, about different physical abilities, like what she said here? She says, do you have any suggestions with regards to outside time when you have children who have different physical needs and abilities?
Right. So I have those issues. So I have a couple of issues. I have physical issues with my daughter, Georgia. And then I have Lewis, which is like a wild card.
Right. Is he really busy?
He is really busy. And I'm sure other parents with kids with Down syndrome will recognize this word, but he elopes. It's called eloping.
Oh, I
and
don't know.
he just takes off.
Oh.
Yeah. So he's like left the house.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. I've had the doorbell ring at 7:00 in the morning, and I'm like, who the heck is at the door? And I go to the door, and it's the police returning my child.
Right. Oh, man.
Yeah. So those are scary things,
Right.
So anywhere that we go has to be enclosed, number one. And I just have to be really mindful about, at least when they were little, for Georgia, I had to be really mindful that she wasn't going to be able to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, trying to accommodate her best that I can, and then talking to her when she was left behind.
Right, so that she wasn't super discouraged.
Right. So, I don't know, that's tough. And if you have any kind of equipment that you have to take with you, that sort of compounds,
right,
going outside, because not only do you have to put them in 15 layers of clothes, but
right.
now you have equipment that you have
right.
to take with you too, and that's a pain in the butt,
right.
even just go to the grocery store. So
right.
I totally understand that. But I say, do the best that you can, and then, have fun with making crazy stuff inside.
Right, that too. I totally agree with that.
I had a trampoline in my house at one point because because they were crazy, and it's like pouring rain and flooding, and
right.
You're like, okay,
right. We still have to get outside.
The living room, and,
right.
And I had a balance beam, and you're putting tape on the floor and doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Right,
so
right. Yeah, we did a lot of those sorts of things too. For the times that it was we did a lot of we played the yoga garden like so much when we lived in Idaho because it was so cold.
I get it because I grew up in Buffalo.
Right,
so
right. That's
totally empathize with the polar vortex and
the cold, the not wanting to go outside. No, I totally get that. I think the biggest thing is to plan it. So, I would say that I would go and check out all of the parks near you and just sort of see what's going on at each of the parks. And then knowing your child's limitations, pick the parks that seem like they would be okay. Pick the parks that have like the enclosure. I love parks with fences, even for all children that like to bolt, because like I've got two that would have just been, I've never had anybody return to me from the police, but I remember, I had just had Eleanor, and she was teeny tiny, and she and Jacob are 22 months apart. And I swear in the time that it took me to change a diaper, he was across the football field, and some woman was bringing him back to me with the ugly, like, I can't believe you can't keep your child in check kind of look on her face. And I remember thinking, you don't have any kids, do you? And if you do, you only have one. But, I think that you just have to sort of look at each of the options that you have. And so exhaust your city parks. Go to all of them and look at all of them. Look at the playground equipment. Look at the opportunities for keeping them sort of corralled if you need to, and go to the places where you feel safe, where you feel like you can, go and do things. We used to do a lot of main lessons at the parks when we needed to, just because I found parks that were conducive to what we needed, like physically wise, and where I knew they would feel safe and I could get things done, and we could get things done, meaning like main lesson work, and they would have that opportunity to be outside and play. So it definitely takes a little more legwork on your part, but it definitely can be done.
Right.
Karen says, we too are limited with outside play, but finally I was able to buy a portable swing that I can bring outside, and he has a recumbent bike. because he has mobility issues. So I think you just have to think outside the box. You have to really just go, what does this child need? And what do you need as far as like, you don't want children climbing the walls because they will do
Right.
that. And then you'll be frustrated. So definitely putting whatever resources you can into that, I think is super important.
Right. And then also like in cold places, there's so many like indoor.
Right. Like trampoline parks and so many things like that now.
And I know that we have a couple in our area, and there's one day a week where, I don't know what they call it, but it's sort of like the quiet play for like kids who have autism or have sensory issues, where they don't blast the music, they don't flash the lights.
Oh, that's cool. I wish the circus place here did that. That'd be amazing.
So there's stuff like that to look into too.
Right. And if they don't have it, you should request it. Because now that you said that, I think we're going to call the circus place today and say, hey, do you have quiet hours? And if not, can we make some?
Yeah, and I think they'd be willing to accommodate you too, because you're probably not the only one out there that wish like they would freaking turn the music
It's
down.
like total marketing for them. They can market like, now we have autism hours or quiet hours, I think. Yeah. For sure. I do think there's, we have a couple of trampoline parks here in Southern California, and we don't have an outside problem. So I know that Kelly has some in Utah, and because we've talked about those. And so I'm sure, just look around and get on the phone. I think that's a great suggestion. Great suggestion. Okay.
And I know that even with mobility issues, like I know for Georgia, when she was little and she wasn't getting around, she walked really late. And so she did have mobility issues when she was little. The thing that she loved the most was to sit on the trampoline and have somebody jump so she could bounce. So I think it's like, little simple things that I think you could probably come up with. I know that makes it, I don't want to sound condescending, because, everybody has their sort of bridge to cross. But I think Melissa's right in saying, you just sort of have to think a little bit outside the box and then hunt that stuff down that you need.
Right. I think so. And I think this is just kind of a side note, because, people sort of make fun of us in the Waldorf world, but whatever. We have passes to Disneyland because we live, like 90 minutes from Disneyland, and we go. And so we go often. And my heart is always warmed because I see what lengths they go to make sure that children that are wheelchair bound or have differences in cognitive or physical abilities, the lengths that the park goes to. And I can't see any other parks that do this. And maybe there are, but I've been to Legoland, don't see it there. But I definitely saw it at Disneyland. They go to great lengths to make sure that every child has a good time. And so it always warms my heart when I see parents that have decided it doesn't matter what's going on with my child. We're coming here anyway because we're going to have fun as a family, and they will accommodate us. And they always do. They always do. I am always super impressed with sort of how they call them cast members, they're not employees, how they step out to make sure that everybody had a fun time. So I think that if you are worried about where you're taking your children and struggling with that, I think that those parks will accommodate you. And I don't know that that's like not the reality for a lot of people, but I wanted to say that because I have a lot of people ask me, like, I want to take my child here, but what about X, Y, and Z? Or what about this? And I think that to know that that there are people that are willing to help, that's what they do. That's what they're excited about. That's what makes them feel like that they are serving. You just have to find those people.
Yeah.
You just have to find
them.
them.
And I know that I'm looking online right now, and I can't remember the name of it. And we have one here in Texas. But there's a big trend right now in terms of playgrounds where they're being designed
Right.
for kids with mobility
Right.
issues.
I actually saw one when we lived in, the first one I saw was probably almost 10 years ago when we lived in Idaho. And there was a section of the regular playground that was just devoted to kids with mobility issues. And I was super impressed and surprised then, but I've seen them other places too. You've got to get on the internet and look.
Right.
And ask your county parks, ask your city parks, get on the phone with them and say, what parks are different mobility, not aware, but, accessible.
Yeah, designed.
Yeah. For sure.
And then another place to look is your children's hospital. Oh. Usually there's a playground there, and it's usually designed for all abilities.
I didn't even think of that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Spend a lot of time in the hospital.
Yeah.
You know these things.
Right. Oh, Linda, you've been such a good resource. I appreciate you taking the time this morning. Is there anything else any other nugget that you can think of that you feel like you have to share today?
I think the only other nugget is just to say to all those moms out there, like, I see you and I've been where you are, and it can be a lonely road, but, don't be lonely. Like, reach out. There's folks here that are so willing to help, like Melissa, and, we can get you over the hump, because it can be hard and daunting and frustrating and scary, and having a kid with special needs is not always a picnic.
It's not, but I at every turn, even though I haven't experienced what you have, I always go, all right, I know this is for like my own growth too. Like and for the siblings' growth that have to go through it with them. That, there's something that they need that for, that we're here to learn in return. And in order to be able to learn, we have to have subjects to learn with.
Right.
So this is part of our learning. I love this. Right. Karen says, we have a local special needs baseball team. The Miracle League is nationwide. They are also building a special playground for us. We are so lucky. So Karen lives in Florida.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome things. Very good.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. I so appreciate you. And thank you, everybody who's tuned in today. We'll have this video up hopefully by the end of the day, and you guys can rewatch it and watch the replay. And thank you again, Linda. I really appreciate everything and the time that you've taken this morning. So thank you so much.
Sure.
And hugs to you and your family.
Yeah, anytime. Hey.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye, Melissa.
Okay, guys, we are going to close up here. Thank you again for joining us today. I so appreciate Linda and all the wisdom that she shared. If you didn't catch it from the beginning, go ahead and start it from the beginning when it's finished here on Facebook. And like I said, we'll have it over on YouTube. I think this is a much needed topic. I think that often when we talk about special needs, it's just the autism spectrum stuff that we talk about, and being able to really dive into other challenges, I think is much needed. So I appreciate Linda, and I appreciate all the time that she took with us. So thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week. Don't know what we're talking about yet. And I actually will not be in my office next week. I will be with my grandma in Northern California. So we'll see y'all later. Bye.